This is Man-Made, Conversations with Good Men. I'm Dr. Juliana. I'm a marriage and family therapist and licensed professional counselor. Man-Made is a series looking into the journey of becoming a man, and not just any man, a good man. I found those two words bring up a rich discussion. It's not a benign endeavor to seek these two questions. What does it mean to be a good man? And what are the pathways in becoming one? In this series, I'm talking with men from all walks of life, professions, locations, ages, races, political stances, and spiritual beliefs. This group of men crossed my path in different ways. I found some of these men myself, some men were recommended to me, and a few sought me out for themselves. When it came time for the men to commit to the interview, I asked the men this: to only represent his experience, beliefs, and thoughts. And the hope is that collectively, these good men stories form a powerful story and vision that take us into a private view of what it's like to be a good man in this day and age. Welcome to Man-Made, my conversations with good men. This is Dr. Juliana. All right, so that's one of them, and let me do it again. So take two for the audio. This is Man-Made, Conversations with Good Men. I'm Dr. Juliana, a marriage and family therapist and licensed professional counselor. Man-Made is a series looking into the journey of becoming a man, and not just any man, a good man. I found those two words bring up a rich discussion. It's not a benign endeavor to seek these two questions. What does it mean to be a good man? And what are the pathways in becoming one? In this series, I'm talking with men from all walks of life, professions, locations, ages, races, political, and spiritual beliefs. Now, this group of men crossed my path in different ways. I found some of these men myself, some men were recommended to me, and a few sought me out for themselves. When it came time for the men to commit to the interview, I asked the men this: to only represent his experiences, his beliefs, and his thoughts. And the hope is that collectively, these good men stories form a powerful story and vision that take us into a private view of what it's like to be a good man in this day and age. Welcome to Man-Made, my conversations with good men. When I finished my interview with Mike McCastle, I think I didn't stop smiling for about 5 minutes. I smiled because every word from him was kind and insightful and gentle, yet his story and his career could, on surface, be the exact opposite. I kept thinking, what a wonderful man, what a lovely soul, and well, how lucky am I to have been able to speak to him? You will find this too with him. Mike has accomplished things physically most can't even dream of. You will be impressed and intrigued by his world records, the people he works with, and the career that he has forged for himself. You'll also be impressed with what he's done for his family. But it is his heart that will draw you to him most. Meet Mike McCastle, a good man. Hi, this is Dr. Juliana, and I am excited to introduce you, Mike McCastle. Hi, Mike.
Hi. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
I'm so happy you're here, and you're coming to us from Portland, Oregon.
Yes.
Nice. Cool city. How long have you lived there?
I've been in Portland about a year now, 2 years maybe.
Oh, okay. Where were you before that?
I lived in Vancouver, Washington, and then before that I lived north of Seattle. So I've been in the Northwest for about 4 years now total.
Nice. That may be where I thought the Washington was before. Yes. Okay. Knew that Washington was kind of in my mind when we were speaking of where you're from before we got on the recording. So talk to us about, give me a little bit of a snapshot of your life and what it's your journey of being Mike.
Sure. Well, I was born in the Midwest. My father was he was in the military, and then he became a manager of a production plant that made cans for like the various Coca-Cola companies like that that made cans. And my mother was a nurse, and then she ended up going into the Air Force, where she finished her career there as a colonel in the Air Force. She retired. So I moved around a lot as a kid. So I moved from the Midwest to New Mexico, and then I went to high school in Las Vegas, and then I went into the military to follow in my parents' footsteps. And also, I was in high school when 9/11 happened, so that greatly influenced my decision to join and serve. I served 11 years in the Navy, and during that time, I found my passion for fitness and human performance and human potential, and really exploring the not just the physical but the psychological applications of seeking the limits of the human soul, really.
Hmm.
And I was able to do a lot of cool things in that arena while in the military, working with Navy SEALs, working with collegiate and national level athletes and things of that sort. After I got out of the military, I decided to explore that route even further, and I became a performance and mental strength coach for athletes, and also in the corporate structure as well. I do a lot of team building, leadership training, and a lot of uh, strength training, actually, for performance training for these people. So that kind of brings me where I am today. 3 years ago, I started an initiative called 12 Labors Project, where I decided to take my lessons learned over the years and apply them to actual physical feats. So 12 Labors Project, I took on the initiative to take on these 12 increasingly difficult challenges for various charities and causes like Parkinson's disease, children's cancer, a lot of military mental health issues as well. Um, Through that endeavor, I've set 4 world records in strength and endurance, and I've completed 6 of the 12 challenges that I've set out to do.
Wow.
So
What are
that's
some
kind
of those
of,
challenges?
so I've broken the world record for the most pull-ups in 24 hours. I did 5,804 pull-ups in 22 hours with a
Oh, wow.
30-pound pack on my back. I did
With a
that.
30-pound backpack, right? Is that right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Wow.
Um, and then I pulled a 2.5-ton truck across Death Valley for 22 miles in 19 hours. Um,
Oh my
I
gosh.
climbed a rope. I climbed a rope that was equivalent to the height of Mount Everest in 27 hours. So 29,030 feet. I flipped a 250-pound truck tire for a half marathon, so 13 miles consecutively. So it's just things that people on the outside might seem as seemingly impossible, and I use it as an outlet to let people really see um, the strength and endurance side, but there's also a lot of vulnerability
Mhm.
and emotions that go into these projects, and I really want to be transparent with that and let people know that you can still be strong, you can still be endure, you can still outlast adversity, and you can still be vulnerable and you can still embrace that and still thrive doing that. So it's not all about just being strong and knuckle dragging, pulling trucks and stuff. It's a lot goes behind it.
Yeah. Wow. So talk to me about the vulnerability piece. How does that manifest or present itself in those feats that you've accomplished?
Sure. When you do any type of feat or anything that requires a great deal of suffering or pain, um, you really have to make peace with all outcomes of that task. So for me, it's while I'm pulling a truck for 22 miles in Death Valley alone in the solitude, um, things are going to come up, emotions are going to come up, and mile 15 of a 22-mile truck pull isn't the time to deny any vulnerabilities that come up, any demons that might arise that will hinder me from completing the challenge, because it's just going to be another element, um, another card stacked against me already in the pursuit of my labor.
Hmm.
So I think part of it is embracing, accepting your vulnerabilities, and kind of using it as a tool, turning it into a reason to even go harder and push yourself even further.
Wow. Wow. That's extraordinary. Is that an insight that you had before you started doing these physical feats, or did that come out just because of what you've been going through?
It is not. It is not. It is something that I've learned and discovered along the way. Like I said, I've done 6 of these already, and the training for these feats and can go anywhere from a few weeks to 6 months to 7 or 8 months. So it's really a journey. Each time I take on a labor, it's really a journey of self-discovery. And in the beginning, I was all about it was really I was very selfish about it. Although I was doing it for a charitable cause, it was really a lot about me and how far I can push myself. And it was a lot of aggressiveness and a lot of um, failure is not an option. And I have to, it was very, I was very, what's the word I'm trying to put on it. It was less about vulnerability. It was more about hiding my weaknesses and
Hmm.
hiding that and just showing the strong parts of me. And it got me by for a little bit, but you know, over time it just really started to wear down on me. Hiding the vulnerability, hiding my weaknesses, hiding the parts about me that I wasn't very proud of, even moments of weakness really became a burden. The more that I didn't accept and embrace it, the more it became a burden on me. And I started to equate it to the actual load of the truck I was pulling, the load of the pack on my back, the load of the tire. It was, those things became symbolic of my own burdens I was putting on myself by being inauthentic with people who supported me and inauthentic with those who watched me perform these feats. They see me and it's just me being strong, and wow, that's really great. Well, what about the other side? What about all the demons that I struggle with? So over the years, I've really made a conscious effort to become more transparent about it, and I felt that burden has lifted off of me. It's very lightening. I feel free, and I feel like I can be a more authentic influencer for people who may find inspiration in the things that I do.
Hmm. Yeah, oh, yeah. I keep wanting to know specifically what you're talking about. Like, I keep wanting to like, what vulnerability, like what was in your, like not even close to what you've done, obviously. Like, so please don't be insulted by this comparison, because I'm very aware this is not as big. But I've run lots of half marathons, but I've only done one marathon. And in that, I mean, I certainly, like in my mind, I hit those demons that I think that you're talking about, of like, I can't do this, and I'm not capable. Do I want to do this? Why am I doing this? Comparing myself to other people. Um, and I was in my head a whole lot, almost more than I was in my body. Is that what you're speaking of the vulnerability of
Mm-hmm.
hitting that, or is it something different?
Well, hitting the wall, getting in your head, the self-talk, the self-talk that we things that we say to ourselves do play a role in it. But I think I'm talking more specifically about everything that you do comes down to a reason. There's a real pure reason why you're doing it. For example, when I attempted to break the world record for pull-ups, it took 2 attempts to do it. The first time I attempted it, I failed. I fell 800 pull-ups short. I tore my forearms. I tore my biceps. It was on national television,
Mm.
uh, and my kidneys began to shut down from the muscle breakdown, and I ended up in the hospital for 4 days.
Oh, wow.
Um, on the surface, that negative self-talk kicked in immediately. I'm a failure. What was I thinking? Everyone said that I couldn't do this. I was really in a bad place, but I realized that was just on the surface. I was in the hospital. I had just raised 10 grand for veteran mental health. I was receiving a lot of positive feedback, but I blocked it out because it was all about me. On the surface, it was just about me and my pity party. Life is cruel. Woe is me,
Yeah.
because I failed the physical challenge, and I had to remember the reason why I was doing it. It wasn't just about the challenge; it was to raise awareness and funds for this cause that was important to me. But I
Mhm.
lost sight of that because that self-talk immediately made it about me. So
Hmm.
I had to remember why I was actually doing it, and how it really wasn't a failure. Although I didn't reach the physical goal, I still was able to inspire a lot of people. And what it took was for a kid who was awaiting surgery. I had a visitor. It was a teenage boy who was awaiting surgery for an organ transplant, and he walked into my room, and he didn't care that I didn't beat the record. He didn't care that, how many pull-ups I did. Um, he just wanted to shake my hand and say how inspired he was just by the effort, the attempt that someone would do something like that for that cause. And I realized in that moment that even at my lowest point, even when it was so easy to make it about me and hide my vulnerability and hide that weakness, I could still lead. I still had a job to do. Even at my lowest point, people still looked to me for that, for that leadership. And I couldn't sit there and let what I perceived to be a failure prevent me from that, or else I would have lost everything.
Yeah.
So that's one of those things where, um, when I flipped the truck tire for 13 miles, my dad passed away the day before I did that,
Oh,
and a lot of stuff came up. I had every excuse, every reason to postpone that event. I had every reason. It was cold, it was wet, it was miserable that day, and my dad had passed 18 hours before, and news reporters were asking if I was going to still do the event the following day. And um, so some things that came up with that is that my dad suffered from Parkinson's for many years, and my dad, growing up, was kind of like my um, my my model for what it is to be a man. He was strong. He was very, forward. He was very, he he was very kind. He was everything that I looked, characteristic wise, to what it means to be a man. I saw that in my dad. And what Parkinson's did was it kind of stripped away the things that he loved, the things that made him, who he was in my eyes. It just slowly kind of took those things away from him, and he became more or less, like a child almost. And it was very hard for me to deal with that, because I was the only one. I was the one who was basically his caretaker, for many of those years. While I was in high school and things like that. So when I joined the military, and I kind of, I distanced myself from my father for many years, because I couldn't stand to watch him, fade like that. And so for me, that was a vulnerability that came up during the truck pull. And I
hmm.
turned that vulnerability into a reason to go do it, into a reason to succeed at it. And uh, I took the burden, I took a lot of regret and a lot of, emotions like that into the challenge. And through the journey of accomplishing it, I was able to overcome those things.
Wow.
Mm.
Wow. That's beautiful. But wow. So you brought up about your dad, about him being
Mm.
one of the people in your life that influenced you of what it's like to be a man.
Mm.
Tell me more of those characteristics. Like what things did you learn from him?
Um, my dad really, he was a simple man. He was very, soft spoken. He didn't speak much, but when he had something to say, it was usually something of value or importance, or you better listen to it. He wasn't a very aggressive man, but he was strong. Um, he was dependable. He was responsible, and he was strong. And for me, that's really um, what I define as what it means to be a good man, is someone who's strong, someone who's dependable, and someone who's responsible, someone who has compassion, and someone who is, it took a lot to watch my father, you know, there were times where when the Parkinson's got really bad, and he was trying to sign a check, for example, and he just couldn't sign his signature because of the shaking, that was associated with Parkinson's. And coming from a person who is just so, in the past he defined himself by his physical prowess, to lose that and to still just handle it with such grace. And I never saw a single frown on his face from it. He always smiled and made light of it. But I know inside it was something that he was really struggling with, losing that part of him. That
Yeah.
was such a large part of him. But he always, he would make a joke, pouring the Parmesan cheese on the pasta, and the Parmesan would get everywhere. And he's like, looks like Christmas came early this year.
Oh,
It's going to be a white Christmas. He would just make little jokes about that. And but inside I knew that it was really, it had to have been hard for him. But seeing how he handled it with strength, and he was responsible, that means he took ownership of his own outcomes. even if it wasn't the outcomes that he wanted in his life, like getting Parkinson's, he still took ownership of it, and was responsible for how he reacted, how he responded to the adversity or the obstacles in his life. So I learned that from him a lot. My dad was very passive, though. I wouldn't say I'm as passive as my father. Um, that's something that I would probably strive more to be in my life as I go through my life journey. But he was a very passive man as well. So
How would you define passive?
I would define passive as a willingness to um, to be able to decide to the good way I would define passiveness in a phrase would just be to choose your battles, right? Sometimes it's better to be wrong in the eyes of someone than to, yeah, passiveness. So, I would see it more or less like, kind of choosing your battles, and sometimes it's better to be wrong, right? Be wrong
Yeah.
than to escalate it into a fight or into a situation that is going to result in animosity. You have to have the patience to see the bigger picture and make decisions that are going to result in productivity and progress than a fight or an argument or aggressiveness.
Hmm.
So being passive is more or less, even when you could probably argue or you could probably um, escalate the situation into a conflict. Passiveness is more or less like taking it as it goes and just kind of choosing your battles.
Hmm. Were there other parts, any other persons or any other parts in your journey of becoming a man that stand out to you, positive or negative?
Hmm. I think that uh, being a man is really it's not a two-dimensional. There's a lot of different, as you said, there's a lot of different components that make it up. Relationships are one, for example. Um, Not just my relationship with partners or anything like that. Just my relationships with people that I encounter in general, and even relationships that are even relationships that you know didn't end in the most ideal way. For example, there's always lessons to learn from it. So I think that on this journey that I'm on, with my successes and my failures as well, I try to learn one gold nugget at least to take from it that'll make me a better person. I'll never wake up in the morning and say, I'm a good man, right? I don't want. I'll never wake up and say, you know what? Look in the mirror, like, Mike, you're really a good man. Because once I say that I'm a good man, then I've stopped pursuing that. Yeah, I've stopped. Um, every day I try to be a better man, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's a lifelong pursuit. The second that I wake up and decide that I'm a good man, I immediately lose effectiveness of what it means to be a good man because I'm already there. So what more do I have to look forward to improving upon tomorrow? So um,
What
in
if
my,
somebody else calls you a good man, like Nick did?
I'm sorry.
What if somebody else calls you a good man, like Nick did, and getting us in contact?
Nick is Nick is a good man. I will
Yeah.
say that Nick is a good man. Uh, but yeah, when if someone says I'm a good man, I don't see it as a definitive statement. It's not I don't perceive it as I'm a good man. Okay, yes, finally I've made it. I'm done. I can stop. I see it more as a report card,
Mm.
like as a progress check. Okay, I'm making progress. I must be doing the right. I must be on the right heading, the
Ah,
right vector. I might stray left, I might stray right, but someone says, hey, you're a good man. Okay, I think I'm going to stay on this heading for a little while. And my access to being a good man is to be honest with myself and realize when I'm not being a good man, when I'm being more aggressive than I should, when I'm not being understanding, when I'm not listening as well as I could. when I'm not being as dependable as I could. That's my access to being a good man. So it's important that that the people that I choose to have relationships with are honest, have integrity, um, and are willing to pretty much call me out and let me know when I'm not being my authentic or when I'm not being a good man. That way I can vector and make the corrections that I need to
Yeah.
stay on the course that I'm on.
Hmm. Well, that's lovely. So what is masculine to you? Like, what does that mean, that concept?
Masculine, I guess a definition of masculine, I mean like masculinity, masculinity.
Hmm.
It could be defined as a level of aggressiveness, desire to protect, desire to compete, a desire um, to lead, a desire to um, kind of fulfill. It's biological, but it's also societal roles that we've constructed go into that definition. So it's a little bit of both, but I think generally it is defined as that that innate desire to fulfill those things like aggressiveness, strength, to protect, to provide, to lead, things like that.
Hmm. What do you think, like right now, what are the great things about being a man in this day and age?
I think that all those things that I've said to define masculinity, I think there's healthy levels of those things. I think there's a healthy, good way to fulfill those character traits. It's when it goes too far. It's when it's you start to go into it being toxic, right?
Mhm.
Um, when those things begin to um, over when those things begin to overshadow other qualities of humanity, of just being human, a decent human being.
Yeah.
That's when things begin to, because there's always, and I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's not bad to be masculine. I don't see being masculine as being a bad thing. It's not bad to be. The answer to those toxic levels of masculinity isn't to be less manly. Um, or it is to establish a healthy level of masculinity, is to find that that equilibrium,
Yeah.
that balance, because we need masculinity, because
Yes.
there are bad people in the world, and um, being a bad person doesn't become good by being less manly. A bad person becomes good by being good, a
Yeah.
good person, and establishing that healthy level of masculinity. So I think the idea of, well, to combat toxic masculinity is to make men less masculine. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that masculinity is needed in our society. We need good men to lead. We need good men to provide. We need good men to protect and still fulfill those roles, but not um, go too far with it. Not be overly um, aggressive, overly protective, overly, that's
Hmm.
when it begins to become a problem.
What are the hardest parts about being a man in this day and age?
In this day and age, the hardest part about being a man, that's a good question. I think that in this day and age, the hardest part about being a man is truly being um, authentic, and it's also embracing that. It goes back to the vulnerability.
Yeah.
I think in this day and age, men have a lot of pressure to um, to be this idea of a man that society has constructed,
Yeah.
um,
Hmm.
and with that pressure comes the this need to somehow just hide any weakness or any vulnerability, or to have the facade of you know you have to struggle, or you have to suffer, or you have to endure pain to reach a certain level of success. I don't agree. I think that the suffering, the struggles you go through, the pain, those are just tools, but not shouldn't be the focal point of your task. If you're focused only on those things and hiding the weaknesses, then maybe you shouldn't have started that journey or that path to begin with, because the purpose isn't to focus just on those things. It's to learn what you need to learn with each day, with each step of the journey.
Yeah.
Um, so I think, yeah, the biggest challenge, well, for me, I can only speak for myself, is to um, constantly remind myself to, when I do have those vulnerabilities, when I do have those moments of weaknesses, is to not shy away from it, not hide it, but to rather share it, embrace it, let people see that, I'm just like you. I go through the same emotions. I go through the same things. This is how I choose to handle it and deal with it and overcome it. It works for me. It could work for you. Maybe some of it could. But the thing is, like, don't hide it. Don't be afraid. Don't be ashamed of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned earlier about a good man, and that's the premise of this interview series is conversations with good men. How would you define that then? I mean, I know you've said what a man is and masculinity, but what is the difference between a man, masculinity, and a good man in your eyes?
Mm. I think the same. So a masculinity. There's pros and cons with masculinity, right? Murder, war, rape, right?
Mm-hmm.
We see the extreme levels of what, like, toxic masculinity can lead to. Being a good man, the same traits. It comes to the choices that man makes. The same traits that can cause someone to rape, start wars, murder, are the same traits that could lead someone to take heroic actions, bravery, defend a loved one, provide for their family. It's the same masculinity that allows both of those things to happen. So it's really comes down to the environment that the man chooses to place himself in, and the people that he chooses to keep in his life, and the values that he chooses to establish for himself, that allows him to express his masculinity in a way that is productive to society, productive to his relationships and his family and his environment. Um, that same masculinity can be used to do terrible, bad things, and we see it in the world. So I think that the difference between a good man and a man who's, masculine, if you want to talk about just the difference there, is it really comes down to the individual choices and environment that the person
Mm-hmm.
chooses to have around himself.
I like also that you're talking about the environment. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious, like, what do you think is the environment that a man needs to foster the good parts and the part of the journey that's going to serve himself the best and his higher self?
Mm-hmm. I think and it's an environment. It needs to be an environment where the man is being challenged, but not challenged too much. A challenge. He needs to constantly be in an environment that challenges him to, but not out of his reach. If a man is in an environment where he's constantly challenged with things that are out of his reach, could lead to self-esteem issues, lack of confidence, and foster that toxic masculinity. It's going to lead to more aggressiveness and things like that, and then projecting that onto society, right? But if he's challenged in a way that is challenging but achievable, if he surrounds himself with people that are, like, for me, I don't ever want to be the smartest person in the room. I want to surround myself with people who I can learn from, people who I can share things with as well, that aren't so over my head, but also people that I can learn from and be a better person. So if I'm constantly surrounding myself with people where I'm the smartest guy in the room, or I'm the strongest person in the room, or I'm the, yeah, it might massage my ego a little bit for a couple moments, but I'm not going to be a better man because of that. I'm going to be better within my little bubble, but I'm not going to be better for my environment.
Hmm. You said earlier, just a little bit ago, that if a man is challenged too much, and it affects his self-esteem and what he thinks of himself, and it's just out of his reach, that he's going to become more aggressive. Why is that the transition? Why is aggression the response to that?
Right. I think what it really comes down to is um, the deny. It goes back to the fear of vulnerability and the fear of being perceived as weak. So the antagonist to weakness is strength. It's aggression. And in a man's brain is, well, if I can't win this argument, if I can't win this conflict with logic, I'm going to fall back onto what I know I inherently can express, which is aggression biologically. If I'm, it goes back to just basic competition between men. Men, I think biologically, they just don't, they have this resistance to being perceived as weak or being perceived as, not competent, which is also being perceived as weak. So the answer to that, if logic fails, if reason fails, then aggression is the natural, I think would be the natural avenue to survive that encounter that man is. And by survive, this means to just get out of that situation with his confidence and self-esteem intact.
It's fascinating. And I agree with you. And I've seen it. And I've heard men talk about this too. And I haven't heard anyone say it as succinctly as you, of that one A to B of how that happens. Okay, so I'm going to throw some words out at you, and I want to have your reaction to them. Provider.
Responsible.
Protector.
Strong.
Love.
Understanding.
Vulnerability.
Acceptance.
Intimacy.
Mutual.
Conflict.
Growth.
Oh, those are good. Oh, that's great. All right. So I've got one last question for you.
Sure.
And if you and you just had a birthday, 33, is that right?
32.
32. All right. So if we were to go about 50 years in the future, and you and I were to sit down and watch this as your 82-year-old self, and watch this video of you talking about your life, what would you want your 80-year-old self to think of the Mike today?
I would like my 83 would be 83. How 50 years ahead?
Yeah.
Yeah, 82. I would want my 82-year-old self to wonder, why is Mike wearing that silly hat? No, I would want to look back and say, the same then as is now. Mike is. It's good to see that my commitment to living the fullest life I can live and being as honest as I could has been true through the decades, through these years. That I didn't falter. I didn't compromise that part of me that embrace vulnerability, that wasn't afraid to express how I really feel, to open up about things. And I didn't lose that over whatever obstacles and life tests that I'll have in the next 50 years. Those things didn't change those core values about myself. And I can look back and say, a lot has changed about me, but those things, those core values have remained the same: authenticity, integrity, and an acceptance of vulnerability.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yes. Well, I hope we can do it then. See what hat you're wearing then.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Mike, for jumping in. Actually, thank you to Nick Wood for connecting us. And thank you, Mike, for jumping into this interview and answering my questions and sharing some of your journey. with me and everybody. And most of all, thank you for being a good man.
Thank you. I appreciate you, and I appreciate you doing this. Is a great series. I think it's going to inspire and help a lot of people.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for listening to Man-Made Conversations with Good Men. Thank you for listening to Man-Made Conversations with Good Men. If you are interested by what you heard, please press the like button and comment in my YouTube channel and subscribe to the series. We'd also love for you to comment and share on social media platforms. If you know a good man or are a good man, contact me at drjulianamorris@gmail.com. It's drjulianamorris@gmail.com, or let me know of your recommendation in the comment sections. Thank you for joining the Conversations with Good Men, Man-Made.